D&D's rules for combat condense the chaos of a dozen different combatants, casting spells and clashing swords, into a few bite-sized rounds of tension and decision. But D&D's combat rules are specialized for particular situations, a kind of D&D combat comfort zone. If you use the rules inside that comfort zone, they're smooth, effective, and fun, like riding a bicycle down a friendly neighborhood street. But if you've ever used those rules outside the comfort zone, you may have noticed the game feeling a bit more like riding a bicycle down a friendly neighborhood ice skating rink. This is because in a role-playing game, the rules that we use need to match the narrative expectations we're setting at the table. If we take D&D's combat rules and use them in scenes they weren't built for, the rules and the narrative get mismatched, and things are going to get wonky. It's like they say, if all you have is a hammer, everything else looks like maybe you should have brought some other tools. D&D's roots are in miniature wargaming, so its combat rules were meant for, and work best during, combats that look like miniature wargaming, which is to say combats with a discrete number of combatants, divided into a small number of teams, usually 2, and where each team is trying to disable or eliminate the other team from the conflict entirely. PCs ambushing a band of goblins, confronting the group of thugs harassing a villager, or sometimes just kicking down the door and fighting the big bad evil guy of the campaign. These are classic D&D capital C combats. And those are the kinds of D&D fights you'll be in most often, but not always. Sometimes you're in a more unorthodox lowercase c combat. Let's say your PCs are being harassed by a recurring NPC of yours. He's just being a real jerk. He's been heckling their progress this entire time and making fun of their inferior intelligence and planning. And one of your PCs tells you her character has had enough, her patience is finally broken, and she'd like to punch that jerk in his face. A younger me might have called for initiative and started a combat right there, but if I did that, things could quickly become weird. What if we roll everyone into initiative and someone else gets to go first before our pugilist PC can pitch her punch? That seems a little weird, plus it's a little unfair to the person literally taking initiative here. Or, if that doesn't happen, or they pass their turns, or you think you're clever, you make them surprised so they can't do anything on their turns. Our PC throws her punch, does her punch damage, but you know that the jerk doesn't want to fight. And as soon as he's punched, he's going to go and skulk away. We just spent a whole bunch of time on things like initiative, hit points, damage, things that weren't relevant and never became so, and we slowed down the game for all of that, for no good reason. In this situation, the combat rules have become a barrier to smooth play, and they're messing with our pacing, so let's drop them. Just say that the PC gets to smack that jerk in his superior schnoz and move on from there. We can always pick up more rules as we need them, and as we transition into capital C combats as it's appropriate. Like, what if the jerk takes one look at his bloody hand and lunges at the PC? His cronies are sure to join in, and the rest of the party is going to want to back up your PC, and now it's looking like a capital C combat. Roll for initiative. I'll move on to another example in a moment, but I do want to mention, just by rolling initiative and putting your players in capital C combat, it can change how they play the scene. You can imagine how your players, in initiative order, might gang up on the jerk, even as he tries to run away, even if none of them were intending to beforehand, because the context of capital C combat rules implies that's the objective they should be pursuing. Capital C combat twists scenes into playing like a war game because that's what they were made to do. Now, another example. A player of yours has infiltrated an enemy campsite and snuck his way into the enemy captain's tent. The player tells you he would like to slit the captain's throat while he sleeps. Man, this game can get gruesome. Let's examine what that would look like using capital C combat rules. First, we roll initiative, even though there's only 2 people present and one of them is asleep, but we'll put that nonsense aside and move on to the player's turn. The player makes his attack roll with advantage because the enemy is asleep, because we're terrible people, and he misses. He fails to do any damage to the sleeping captain he has all the time in the world to kill. Less than satisfying, or he hits, and does crit damage because the enemy is incapacitated, but it's not actually enough to kill the sleeping captain. And now you, as a DM, have to figure out what that even looks like, so you can describe it to the players, while your player sits there, deeply disappointed, getting nothing for all the effort he put in to sneak all the way up to get this one swift, brutal, morally questionable death. In this situation, the rules are mismatched with our understanding of the scene. They're telling us things about the scene that don't make sense according to our understanding of the narrative. We should be able to just slit the throat of this guard, and the rules aren't letting us do that, and that can be awfully unsatisfying to our players. So again, let's just drop them. We don't need rules to tell us that our PC knows how to slit the throat of a helpless unconscious person. That's just the grim reality of being an adventurer. So most of the time, lowercase c combats are about dropping the rules we don't need. But we needn't always drop all of the rules. I'll admit, earlier in our example with the jerk, we could have asked our PC to make an attack roll, depending on the style of game we're playing and what we want out of the scene. I mean, if we know that whether or not the punch connects, it isn't going to affect the scene very much, there isn't going to be very much drama there, so we won't bother rolling. But, on the other hand, if we know that the jerk will run if he's clocked in the face, but might have the courage to fight if the PC misses, then that's something we're going to want to roll for, and probably telegraph to our players, so they'll be invested in the check, waiting with bated breath to see how it plays out. So, we only pick up the rules we absolutely need in lowercase c combats. But sometimes we're well served to having a custom set of rules we can come back to over and over again in particular lowercase c combats. You're likely already familiar with some of these. The Dungeon Master's Guide has rules regarding chases, Tomb of Annihilation goes over dinosaur racing, and everyone, including Wizards of the Coast, have put together their own set of rules for warfare. Chases, races, and warfare are pretty common lowercase c combats, and I think we all intuitively understand that those are something different than capital C combats and require a different set of rules. And if the tools don't already exist, we can homebrew them. Especially if we know a particular lowercase c combat is coming, we can prepare for it in our adventure prep. And we can prepare for it in such a way that it emphasizes the kinds of things we want out of the scenes we're going to play. A gladiator pit fight is going to play very differently if your characters are making charisma checks to win over the crowd versus if they're emphasizing tactical decisions about what weapons to choose and how to best set up advantages that they can capitalize on later. And it'll feel very different if they're doing both. So, if you're ever running a conflict and you feel like you're doing a lot of pedaling just to slide a couple more inches on the ice, remember, you only have to pick up the tools you need for the conflict in question. Remember that, and you'll deliver a more satisfying game to your players. See you next time.
Man, this game can get gruesome. Use that one.